just know that you have control to close your eyes or step away for a little bit. Sometimes I combine this with other topics, and I really thought it would be interesting to do a session fully on trauma-informed, and I am just so honored and grateful for MemoryFox for hosting this session. So thank you, and please do stick around to learn more about MemoryFox, because I really do believe this would be a very powerful trauma-informed tool that you can add to your toolkit. Before we dig in, I wanted to do a quick centering meditation, just so we can let go of what happened before this, what you might have on your plate afterwards. I want us to feel centered and grounded and present. So for the next minute, if you would like, you can close your eyes. If you would like, you can take a few deep breaths. So let's just do that for just a moment. If you're feeling like you're having a little bit of trouble regulating your breath, you can look from side to side, and this will actually activate the breath for you. So I just invite you to do that. And again, close your eyes and let's just take a few deep breaths and remember that we chose to be in this space today. Okay, thank you. Before we hop in, I want to make sure that you have some free resources that I have for you that will supplement what we're learning today, so you can put things right in action. There is a storytelling cheat sheet, which actually has interview questions that you can use that are trauma informed. And there's also some trauma informed guidelines in here. And there's a dozen more marketing and communications templates and resources in here as well. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat and just give you a moment to do that. You can also scan if you are seeing this recording. So we just want to make sure that you have a moment to get the free resources that come along with this training. And that was a really wonderful introduction. Just wanted to tell you a little bit more about my story. I am an accidental nonprofit marketer. If you have landed in your role accidentally, let me know in the chat, raise your hand. A lot of us landed here accidentally. I did study journalism and started my career in the Peace Corps. I was in Ghana, West Africa as a public health volunteer. And it was, as you can imagine, a really impactful season for me. And when I came home, I didn't know if I wanted to pursue journalism anymore or if I wanted to be in the field. And really was able to reconcile that, finding a communications marketing job at a community health center in New York City. I worked in Chinatown, Manhattan for quite a few years. And so while I was grateful to find home, I knew very little about nonprofit marketing communications. I could tell a good story, but that's kind of where it ended. And there's so much more that goes into being a good marketer. So I spent probably 5 to 7 years really taking advantage of webinars like this, reading blog posts. I did get my master's, but really facing a whole lot of imposter syndrome and struggling along the way. So if you feel like you're in that season, know that that is par for the course, and we've all been there. So it took quite some time for me to feel an expert in my field, but I did eventually build very successful digital marketing programs, two very large, one of them being the largest public health nonprofit serving New Yorkers. And I hit another crossroads. I had my first baby. This is actually my second here, Nona. I had my first baby, Mia, in 2018. And it was time for me to kind of get off the hamster wheel, to leave my in-house marketing job and start my consultancy so I could spend more time with my daughter. And that's when I started Maria Bryan Creative. And in this role, I teach and consult nonprofit marketing and messaging to nonprofits, thousands of nonprofits across the country. So thrilled that you're here. I bet some of you have been in one of my trainings before. So thank you for sitting with this this intro again. And I have typically ended my intro there, but we are all continuing to learn. And I hope that we are all open to learning. And I know that to be true for you, because that's why you're here. Last year, I had a student in a marketing training ask me what trauma-informed practices work into my marketing framework. And it shook me a little bit. I didn't know. I didn't have an answer for her. And I tried my best intuitively to give advice for that, but I didn't know. And that put me on a journey of having a better understanding of being trauma-informed as a person and how to integrate a trauma-informed lens into nonprofit marketing and messaging. And so, yes, I am now getting a certificate in trauma and resilience. I'm also getting a certificate in somatic embodiment and regulation. This is a passion of mine. Those of you storytellers in the house carry a huge role to tell stories that may be painful, but we know that they're very important to tell these stories in order to further and move our mission. And we can do this in a way that is trauma-informed and that has a big impact. We don't have to water down our stories. So thank you for being here. Let's dig in. We're going to talk about some basics about trauma and why it's so important that we're talking about trauma-informed marketing and storytelling. We are going to talk about how trauma affects three kinds of people in our world. The story owner, those are the brave people that are sharing their story, likely your beneficiaries and clients. The story receiver, that is your audience, people who are reading and consuming your stories. And the witness is you, the storyteller who is gathering and telling these stories. So I'm going to give you really actionable things that you can do to protect these three kinds of people. So what is trauma? There are lots of definitions of trauma. This is one from Substance Abuse and Child Welfare, and it is a human response that we have to an experience that threatens our safety or our life. Research for trauma is actually fairly new. We've done more research for individual trauma. So that is a person who has had these kinds of experiences that has affected them physically or emotionally. But we're starting to look more into community trauma. How can community experiences, the neighborhoods that you're living in, racism, all kinds of vulnerable communities, how is trauma affecting a shared experience? So just know that that trauma can affect people in different ways. And one way that this kind of research is helping us understand trauma and effects is through something that we call ACEs. These are adverse childhood experiences. These are events that adults will reflect on that they experienced as children. And through collecting a lot of data of all different kinds of people, data is showing that people that have experienced these kinds of adverse childhood experiences have had both behavioral and physical consequences later in life. And after some time, we've moved past just these ACEs, and I'm saying ACEs here because you're going to hear me say that a little bit further. So ACEs, the adverse childhood experience. That there's also adverse community environments as well. So we're expanding our research and talking about not just the events above, but also these kind of community events. So if you are starting to learn about trauma, you might hear about ACE scores. So that means maybe you've experienced one of these, maybe you've experienced 4. The more you experience, the more likely you are to have different physical and behavioral consequences later in life. So how prevalent is trauma? It's huge. The CDC considers it a public health issue. And when we talk about ACEs, these events, most people have experienced at least one of these by the time that they're an adult. Now, you can experience a traumatic event and heal from it very quickly, or you can have unresolved trauma that results in post-traumatic stress disorder And 1 in 11 people, there are 84 of us in the room right now, 1 in 11 people do experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And as you can imagine, or would imagine, there are certain demographics and populations that are at higher risk for having more traumatic events in their childhood. And a lot of us are serving very vulnerable populations. So more so to know, even if you don't know or think that the people you serve have experienced trauma, they likely have. It's more maybe prevalent than you think. So the body is actually very amazing. And trauma has a purpose. The reaction to trauma has a purpose. If you were to see a child stuck underneath a car, or you were in the forest and faced a wild, dangerous animal, your body will produce adrenaline and cortisol, your breath will speed up, your heart will start racing, and as a result, you will be more equipped to get yourself to safety. So this reaction we have to trauma has a place, and it does help us when we are in very life-threatening situations. So here's where it becomes problematic. If you have several of these trauma events, or if trauma events are unresolved, your body doesn't know how to turn off these responses. So this is when we talk about the lifelong physical and behavioral health problems that people have. It's because that triggered reaction your body has to trauma is happening on a regular basis. So when you hear this fight, flight, or freeze, this response to trauma, fight is when people can, really get angry and aggressive, and in a certain re-traumatizing situations, flight is they can want to turn off, and freeze is also just wanting to turn off. These can be very helpful in very harmful situations. Unresolved can be very problematic. And so you might be aware of more of the mental, emotional, behavioral effects of trauma. I was surprised and horrified to really grasp how many long-term health consequences and effects there are to people who have unresolved trauma or who've experienced trauma in their lives. 5 of the top 10 leading causes of death are associated with childhood events. And there's other conditions like asthma, obesity, and depressive disorder, and even substance abuse that is correlated to trauma. But I want to leave you with this when we're talking about trauma. And again, the body really is so phenomenal. We thought for some time that trauma can almost damage your brain in a way, and you'll just have to do the best you can to cope. But new research has shown the brain is actually changeable. It's plastic. This is called neuroplasticity. That means that at any point in your life, you can heal your brain. So no matter how much trauma or the kind of trauma you've experienced, there are ways for you to recover and to live a healthy life, even after experiencing trauma. So now, where does trauma-informed storytelling come in? This is a practice that recognizes how many of us have experienced trauma, and what kind of workflows and best practices and tools can we use to center the health and safety of our beneficiaries, the people whose stories are telling our audiences, and our storytellers. I really love this quote. It really speaks to those who bravely share their stories are humans, and they're complex and they're nuanced, and they don't want to be portrayed as victims. They want agency while telling their story. And so with that, whether you are using this lens in storytelling or as a parent, as a friend, as a daughter, when you being trauma informed really comes down to 2 things, and that is providing safety and agency. People who have experienced trauma didn't feel safe and they didn't feel in control. So you can counter that by providing utmost safety and agency when you are in relationship with someone who has experienced trauma. So that is the framework that we're going to talk about. How can we provide safety and agency? Let's start with this idea that just because someone has been served by your organization that they should share their story. So let's full stop not have our beneficiaries feel that they owe you their story. Sometimes I have clients saying when participants enter the program or leave the program, it's a really great time to gather their story. I actually don't think it's the best time to gather their story because that's not really giving them the agency that they deserve. So make sure that this is the choice of the story owner and not something that they owe us since we serve them. This is really, really key, y'all. Slow down your story gathering process. When I worked in-house, my goal that I set for myself was to produce 2 client stories every month. And that didn't leave much time at all for trauma-informed interview process or a review process. So I want to give you permission and challenge you to maybe limit the number of stories that you tell each year. Maybe just 3 to 5 beneficiaries. You can fill the stories with other maybe people that haven't experienced trauma or that are more equipped to tell their story, like staff, volunteers, and donors. And that is going to leave room for you to create a lengthy process and really allow for people to make decisions about their story. Also, it's key that people have closed the transformation arc. So let me tell you a little bit about the transformation arc. There's a really simple framework that I teach for telling a good story, and this is adapted from StoryBrand by Donald Miller. Let me know in the chat if you're a fan of Donald Miller and his StoryBrand. And that is this. An everyday person, it could be me or you, it could be your uncle or your daughter, or your cousin or your coworker, faces a huge obstacle and challenge, and it's so huge that they can't pretend it doesn't exist. They decide to check out and face this challenge, and they meet all kinds of conflicts and obstacles along the way. But they do, within this journey, meet a wise mentor or guide, someone who facilitates this journey for them. And at the end, they do overcome this challenge. But the key is they are never the same. Their life has been transformed. And so your beneficiary is this lead character. And as you might guess, the facilitator, this guide, is your nonprofit. So your nonprofit is not the lead character. They are facilitating this really beautiful transformation. So with that said, if you are going to clients or beneficiaries when they are in possibly the middle of some of the most painful and traumatic experiences of their life, it's not a good time to have them share their story. In fact, data shows that when someone has experienced a traumatic event, it can take 3 months for symptoms of trauma to even show. They might not even understand the experience that they've been through. It's worth waiting for people who have completed this journey and are now on the other side. They are willing and ready to tell their story, and it's still their choice, but they will decide that maybe telling their story is part of their healing process. And of course, this should underline all of your story gathering processes, and that is prioritizing their health and well-being. So that's deciding we're going to put aside how many stories we want to get and maybe the story that we want to tell. And we're really going to give autonomy and control to the story owner to tell their story and put maybe our wants and needs on the back burner. There is no one that is going to be a more fierce advocate of your beneficiaries than our program staff. And give me an amen in the chat if you feel that to be true, or if you're a program staff. I hear all the time from marketers that their program staff say, I'm not going to parade my clients for your marketing and fundraising needs. So there are ways for you to involve program staff into this story gathering protocol and workflow. What might that look like? Well, maybe you're going to the program staff and say, are there alumni of our program or people in our program that you think are willing and ready to tell their story? And if they know of someone, have them explain consent to them, which is our second point here, making sure that someone they know and trust is really explaining to them where this story might show up. And maybe the program staff want to actually, or maybe the client wants the program staff to sit in to the interview. And I also want to give program staff time and space to review these stories, because they might see things that you might not find. So this sounds like you're adding a lot of extra work, but actually your program staff, and if it's only going to be 3 to 5 stories a year, will deeply appreciate being part of this process. And it's a great way to build bridges between the program staff and the development and marketing staff. And with that, in your story gathering protocol and workflows, make sure that your story owners are giving enthusiastic and informed consent. That means that their consent is language and culturally appropriate. That means that they have a broad understanding of where this story might show up. So this is something that you can have written. I am going to share some links to resources further on this presentation, but ethicalstorytelling.com has a fantastic trauma-informed media consent form that you can use and adapt for your organization. When I talk about slowing down the story gathering process, when you do that, you can actually give story owners time and space to review the story that you have written for them. That gives them, and again, the control, the autonomy to clarify sections, or even say, okay, in the moment I was sharing that part of my story, but now that I see it on paper, I actually don't want you sharing that part of my story. So give them that opportunity. And at any time, a story owner should be able to retract their story. And this might feel not great for marketers in the room, but I'll tell you what, when I worked at the Community Health Center in Chinatown, and this is almost 10 years ago, they really were far more trauma informed than I had the words to articulate. And we once had this huge photo shoot. We had a lot of community members. The consent was language appropriate. It was culturally appropriate. We used an image of a family. And again, it wasn't just a picture we took during an event. This is a photo shoot where it was like really clear what the intention of the pictures were. She saw her image on a brochure and decided that she no longer wanted her image in our promotional materials. And we trashed hundreds of brochures, found a new image, and reprinted. That's what it takes to center your story owners and to put the health and wellness of your story owners first. So when it comes time to the interview, so this is a really crucial time and a space that you want to be trauma informed, because this is the space where your clients are telling their story. So make sure you are giving a lot of time and space so that your story owners feel that they have control, choice, boundaries, and autonomy during this time. So here are a few things you can do to allow for that. One is give them a choice in who to interview them. Maybe you're not the best person to interview them. Maybe they want someone to interview them that looks like them. Maybe a program staff. Maybe they prefer a male or female to interview them. Give them that choice. Give them a choice of who can be in the room. Maybe they want a family member in the room. Maybe they want to be in public. That makes them feel safer. And maybe they don't want to be in public. Maybe they want to be in their own home. Maybe they want to be at your organization. Give them that time. As they are talking and you're feeling that there is emotions building, budget time for breaks. You can take breaks between questions and give them that space and that choice to take breaks between questions. Before every single question, remind them that it is their choice to answer a question fully or at all. And then respect those boundaries. You might know the full story and want to get to that juicy piece of the story, but if they don't want to share it, that is a choice for them to make. So remember to share that often. I'll give you a story of when this was really illuminated for me. I was working with a client named Joyelle whose daughter passed away when her daughter was 5 months old. And as a result of that, she quit her job eventually and started a nonprofit that is championing bereavement care and advocacy. She is a powerhouse and she has an amazing organization. And I was helping her with her story. And when we came to the point where she was going to share about her daughter, she said to me, Maria, I have no problem talking about myself and what it was like to lose my daughter, but I am not giving you any details about my daughter, who she was, her name, how she died, what her diagnosis was. It's none of your business. It's nobody's business. Now, that's a boundary she set. Not everyone's going to know to set those boundaries, but clearly she set that boundary because she has had people who really tried to get that out of her, and it didn't feel good for her. So either allow people to come up with those boundaries or give those boundaries. Let people know you can share your story. You don't necessarily need to share stories of secondary characters in your organization. And I'll tell you what, and I'm going to give an example of what I think is a really beautiful trauma-informed story. You can talk about pain and problem in a way that's understood without really going in depth into the details. It is possible. So shoot for that when you're doing these interviews. Get to the pain and the problem. You don't necessarily have to go deep into the details. So what happens if you are in an interview process and you see that the person, while telling their story, is becoming re-traumatized? First of all, know that this is serious. It can result in a psychiatric crisis. So one thing that you can do is before even the interview, especially for people that might be more vulnerable to re-traumatization, make sure that you have a contact of someone who may be able to support them. This can be a counselor that they already have. It can be maybe a family member or friend, someone that you can call and say, this person is having a difficult time. Can you come here and be available right now? If you're seeing signs, and you'll know, listen, I'm not going to give you a checklist, you'll know, they might be becoming incredibly, very emotional, panically, or suddenly they might become confused or disconnected, really unable to complete a sentence. These are signs that it's time to finish the interview. So stop the interview if you're feeling like they are telling their story is triggering to them. And something that would be really amazing is to have resources on hand for them, because maybe they aren't getting the help that they need if these are resources that your nonprofit doesn't already provide. So these might be counseling service, support groups, or other professional help that might be on a sliding scale and in your community that you can pass off to them. Don't act as a counselor if you are not a certified counselor. This is a point where you want to get someone that they trust to come in and support them and just give them resources to get further help. Okay, I just want to pause for a moment and give you an invitation. And Carly, if you can share a link in here, if as I'm talking, you're feeling like you would like more support in telling your stories in a way that compels action and is trauma informed, I do want to share a program that I'm really passionate about. And this is a 2-day messaging retreat. It's an intensive story-based, story-led messaging retreat that kicks off with a 2-hour trauma-informed session where we actually work together on creating the media consent form, the guidelines and principles that will guide your story gathering process, and actually create that workflow in your organization that makes sense. So here's an invitation to you. If you would like to work further with me on clarifying your messaging and doing so with trauma-informed best practices, just inviting you to have a phone call with me sometime in the next couple of weeks. I've limited phone call spots, but I open them up for those of you here in this space that would like to chat further about that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about are your audiences. I love this quote from Marilyn Murray from Love 146. She's the communications director at this organization, Love 146, which works with girls who have been trafficked. Actually, when I first started researching trauma-informed nonprofit marketing, this is one of the very few things that I found out there. This is really, really important. We want to attract everyone to our mission, but generally speaking, for those of you who have been in development for some time, people that donate and invest in your organization, whether it's through money, volunteering, board, likely their connection is that they have experienced or have some kind of emotional relationship with your mission. And if your work touches on things that involve trauma, then you can assume that your audiences, your donors, your board members, your volunteers have likely experienced that same kind of trauma as the people that you serve. So let's assume trauma, not just when we're interviewing story owners, but when we're writing these stories. The last thing we want people to do is to read our stories and be left feeling re-traumatized. We want them to feel inspired. We want them to feel hopeful. So how do we do that? Here's a few ways that we can protect the safety of our audiences. So like I said, assume trauma when you are writing your stories. When you are telling stories, like I said before, you don't have to focus on the pain or go into detail about the pain. It's important that it is clear that there is a problem and that there is pain that is part of this journey, but it doesn't need to take up the bulk of the story. Make sure that the goal of your story is to inspire transformation, awe, and hope. And I'm going to say trauma-informed and ethical storytelling go hand in hand, but they are a little bit different. And I'm not touching too much on ethical storytelling right now, but I will say when you use this focusing on transformation, awe, and hope as a guide, as a guidepost for you, your calls to action are going to ask people to empathize and to support your organization's really innovative solution and amazing work, instead of inviting them to become saviors and to come in and save these people. This is why it's so important to make sure you're telling stories of people who have completed the transformation arc. Here's another really important way to protect your audiences. Allow for natural urgency. Don't fake urgency. Don't tell people give now or something really terrible is going to happen to our community, unless it's true. If it's true, that's the case. And maybe you have a donor who's going to double donations for a short period of time. But to build trust, first of all, and also part of that safety and control is you don't want people to feel manipulated into giving. You want people to feel like it is their choice to give. So don't lean into shame, manipulation, or false urgency. Be truthful. Honor your audience in that way. So I am going to share a video. It's just about a 1.5 minute video, and then talk a little bit. It's not perfect, but why I think this is both a trauma-informed and ethical story.
I was diagnosed with retinoblastoma in my left eye when I was 4 years old, and at that age, I don't remember much.
When Emmanuel was first diagnosed, it was very traumatic to hear that my child had cancer. When we arrived at St. Jude, we made the decision to have Emmanuel's eye removed, and Emmanuel recovered so well.
Around the time I first really realized I survived cancer was around the time I first started playing football, I realized it isn't as easy to play football with one eye than it is with two. Some things I would do to really help my hand-eye coordination would be something so simple as just throwing something up and being able to make sure I have the depth perception to catch it. Everybody else did have a little advantage over me, but as I got older, I became a harder worker to overcome what a lot of people call a disability.
Emmanuel never let his lack of an eye hold him back in anything. Emmanuel's one of the hardest workers I've ever met. He's one of the hardest workers I've ever coached. He has a phenomenal GPA, which is serving him well now that he is going to go play football in college.
It's been a long journey, and now I'm finally graduating high school, going off to college. St. Jude basically just saved my life, and I feel like I should do anything and everything I can to give back to them so they can help save another child's life.
Okay, let's talk about this. First of all, the mom even says this was a traumatic experience having a son that was diagnosed with cancer. Now, this is about a minute and a half, I think, maybe more. The problem and the pain is described in the first 22 seconds of this video. That's all the context you need. And then he survives cancer. The rest of the video talks about there's still obstacles and there's still challenges. And I love that we honor that. We honor that just because he survived cancer doesn't mean that his life was just, he was unbeatable from there on out. He still had challenges. He still had challenges with pursuing football, something that he loved, but he overcame those challenges too. And we definitely have the lead character here, which isn't St. Jude. We talk a little bit about St. Jude, but it really is about this lead character. And from the images and the music, we do experience awe and inspiration. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know how intentional St. Jude has been lately, but if you go back to some of their earlier videos, they spend a lot more time digging into the pain and the trauma of having a child with cancer. It's much more emotional. You hear the beeping of children and of the heart of the just all the hospital sounds, which can be very re-traumatizing for someone that has had a child with cancer. They do all kinds of audio and images of very young babies being, going through cancer treatments. Now, I'm not saying there's never a place for things like that, but if 50% of your video is conjuring up that kind of emotion, it's not really protecting people who want to give. And I'm telling you, people who want to give to childhood cancer are likely people who have had childhood cancer themselves or know somebody who has experienced childhood cancer, likely maybe their own child. So if that is your main audience, I think this is a really beautiful way to start off saying, look, this was a really, really difficult season in our life, but we overcame it. And so much of this story is about how this young man has just lived a really beautiful young adulthood as a result of the work of St. Jude and his time with St. Jude. Is it perfect? It's not perfect, but I think this is an example of how we can focus on transformation. Okay, so let's talk about you. Has anyone to tell me in the chat if you have been following NXIVM, this cult NXIVM or the vow? I'm a little bit obsessed. I watched all of the first documentary and all of the second documentary. And something that I found really fascinating about the second documentary was this character, Emily Saul. She was this New York Post reporter. And at the start of this documentary, she just felt like it was so juicy, and she covers all kinds of court cases like this. And she was very open about how she kind of enjoys it. She enjoys this kind of covering this kind of crime and hearing the details. And you see through the course of the documentary that it starts deeply affecting her. It almost looks like she's becoming depressed by the end of this documentary. And they start to interview her more and more, and you really see the impact that following this case has for her. And when I heard this, I had to grab this from her, that what it means to bear witness, and how when you bear witness to pain and trauma, it does take a little bit of you. So let's talk about how you can protect yourself, or as an organization, how you can prioritize the storytellers in your organization who are vulnerable to re-traumatization of their self or secondary trauma. So this is another key reason why you don't need to be gathering 20 traumatic stories a year. Really space out maybe 3 to 5 stories that you want to have a year. And make another reason for spacing out the story gathering process is for your own protection of your health. So after you have interviewed someone, maybe you can debrief with a trusted colleague or supervisor, maybe a friend at work, or even your supervisor. You can just sit with them after an interview and just talk about it. Just kind of get it out and talk about how that was maybe a challenging story for you. Create self-care practices specifically for when you are both interviewing story owners and when you are writing those stories. So that might be a meditation that you're doing, something accessible. I always like taking a walk, but some people hate taking walks. So do something that just is going to feel good for you. Maybe you are always going to bring a cupcake that day that you know you're going to interview something that is going to allow you to take a break from that emotional space and get your mind off it. So any kind of enjoyable task that you can fit into that day, do so. And if you can't do that within the day, make sure that you're prioritizing that for after work. And set boundaries. So you don't have to do 2 interviews a month like I set for myself. You decide how many interviews that you're going to do. So talk to your supervisor about the kinds of goals you have and how they can be protecting you. Also, maybe you'll decide that you will just do interviews 1 day a week. So maybe it's Fridays for you, so you know you have the weekend. Maybe it's Mondays for you. Be mindful of, or maybe it's going to be at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. Set those boundaries on when you're going to do this again, so you're just leaving room before and after to take care of yourself. And invest in talk therapy. If you're not already investing in talk therapy, it's something that all of us in nonprofit should be doing. So right now, I just want to guide you through a very simple somatic exercise that just means something that is going to regulate your nervous system. So if you're thinking of a really practical thing that you can do before and after interviews, or after maybe you've heard a story that was really upsetting for you, or after writing a story that might have taken something out of you. Here's an exercise that you can do. If you haven't practiced square breathing or box breathing, it's really helpful. So we talked about earlier all the things that happen in your body when you've experienced trauma. Your heart rate goes up, your hormones start producing things, your adrenaline is rushing, your breath speeds up. So regulating your nervous system means doing things that are going to counter that and calm those things down. So what can you do to lower your heart rate, to slow down your breath and other things that are triggered through trauma? And breathing, just breathing, is a great way to regulate your nervous system. Something I learned recently is that nose breathing is actually even better for your health than mouth breathing. Nose breathing taps into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a specific network that relaxes your body after it has experienced something very stressful. So as you're doing this breathing exercise, at least breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, or just focus on breathing in and out of your mouth. If for any reason you can't nose breathe, like maybe you have horrific allergies like I do, that's okay. You can breathe through your mouth, but one way to really enhance this exercise is to breathe through your nose. So square breathing means that we are going to breathe in for 4 seconds. We're going to hold for 4 seconds. We're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. And you can do this just a few times, maybe 4 or 5 times. And it's a very safe way to regulate your breathing. So let's practice this. I'm going to do a count for us to do square breathing twice. Okay, so we're going to start with breathing in. And if you can, breathe in through your nose. In, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. So you can do this on your commute to work. You can do this in your office. People don't have to be peeking in, wondering why you're doing yoga. It's just a really simple thing that you can have to equip you when you are feeling stressed and anxious, or even feeling re-traumatized by your storytelling. Okay, I come at you with all of this, and this was a lot to take in. And if you are feeling like you're remembering all of these things that you did wrong, I want you to know that we are just learning together, and we are all in this together. And I wish I could give you a checklist, but some of this is just trying things and being intuitive. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. It's going to be hard to shake up your workflows, but it's going to be worth it. So we are in this together. I share this information with lots of love, with grace and empathy, and no judgment. It means so much to me that you've chosen to be in this space today. Carly, if you can share links to more resources, there's a few resources that you can go to. ethicalstorytelling.com is a phenomenal resource. One of the links is on creating word banks from my good friend Cody Hayes. So make sure you check that out. And there's a few other resources there as well for both ethical and trauma-informed storytelling. And so here's our wrap up. And I know that we're coming to a close. If you can tell me in the chat any takeaways, what are your big aha moments that you have today? And I just want to leave you with that it is possible to tell really beautiful, impactful stories that get people excited to donate, to volunteer, to dedicate their lives to your cause. You can do it, and you can do it in a way that protects and honors your story owners and your story receivers, and to protect yourselves, the witness. If you would like to work further together or just learn more from me, I would love for you, again, feel free to, and Carly, if you can put in some of these links for ways that we can keep in touch. I do have this core messaging retreat that I'd love to talk to you more about. I do one-on-one consultations. I also have a free Facebook group where I post a lot of trainings that I have coming up and share all kinds of resources. So that's a great way for us to keep in touch. Well, and I now ask that you go forth and work on a purpose. I'm going to end my screen and move things over. And I just want to say, do stick around to learn a little bit more about MemoryFox. The magic of MemoryFox is it gives autonomy and agency to story owners and what they want to share. So if you're thinking about what are tools that we can integrate into our trauma-informed toolbox, I really think that MemoryFox is a great tool to add, and I'm just so thrilled that they allowed me to share this training with their people. So I'll pass it on to your team.
Thanks, Maria. We really appreciate you sharing your time. It was so informative, inspiring, and engaging. So thank you. We have a lot of questions in the chat about the retreat, but I know we will be sure to share that link with everybody. And do we have time for just one or two quick questions with you?
I'm here for as long as you
Let's do it.
need to be.
We'll make it
tried to
quick.
end a little early for questions. So
we'll
yeah,
make it
I'm
quick.
here.
So we had a great question from Stephanie asking, they're a grant making organization. So
Right.
can you give some advice for reaching story owners and not just the intermediary?
Right. So the thing is, you do need to work through an intermediary. So just reaching out directly to the client and the beneficiary is going to be overstepping maybe the program staff. So to our grant writers out there, I say reach out to the program staff. Maybe you're even like a lot of times program staff will have meetings maybe once a month just to kind of come in the same room. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's an in-person meeting. Ask if you can come, sit in and listen to what they're saying, because you might get some ideas for stories and what's going on in the ground. And ask for just 5 minutes at the end of the meeting to say, listen, I really could use a few stories for grants. Can we please discuss maybe someone who has left the program or is in the program that is willing and ready to share their story? I think that's a great way to try to involve program staff.
Maria, I think that's beautiful advice. That's something we talk about a lot, even starting a meeting with your team, like share a quick story that you've heard this week. So brilliant. We have another question from Valentina. Can you give a couple more just tips on gathering information from our storytellers without re-traumatizing them?
Right. So there are a few questions that you can ask that focus more on the transformation than the pain. So I do have in that, and maybe Carly, if you could share just one more time for those that came late, the training resources might actually have it too. I think I saved that link. They're not perfect interview questions, but if you're just having one or two questions on what the problem is, and if the other questions are bringing in your nonprofit. So who did you meet? Who were one of the first people you met when you came to our program? What was that like? Is there anyone in our organization that had a really big impact with you that was just really helpful or just left an impact? And let them tell that story. Know that in your story, although yes, you want to continue to get the obstacles and the challenges, ask some questions about what does it feel like today to be on the other side of this? What is your life like today? And one question I love to ask is, what does your future look like, right? And that's what we're all doing. We all have a vision for a brighter future, and get that from them. What does their future look like now that they've had this support from your organization? Now, in your story, you will leave room for adding more context and more nuances. So a good structure would be you're introducing someone, whatever their problem is. You might come out like I did and say, this is a problem that affects our community in a great way. So that doesn't necessarily have to come from the story owner. And you can say that in a way that still is protective of the audience too, but you don't have to get all the details and the nitty-gritty of the problem for them. So hopefully that's helpful. Ask questions that do allow for the nuance and the complexity of humans by like what were maybe some other challenges along the way. But let's really get to the heart of their transformation and how their future is so bright because of their time with your organization.
Well, thank you, Maria. We really can't thank you enough for being just such a key one of our partners and for all of the critical work you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, and if I didn't get to any questions, please do feel free to hop on that Facebook group, and we'll keep the conversation going there. Thank you so much, MemoryFox.
Thank you, Maria. And wait, there's more. So feel free to stick on with us. I'm going to invite Danielle from our team on stage. Hello, Danielle. I'll give you a second to get started. But what Danielle's going to walk you through is give you a little bit more insight into us as MemoryFox as a team. And take it away, Danielle. It's all you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that, we just spend a lot of time talking about a lot of, pretty heavy things. And So I hope that, if you have space and time to listen to a little bit about MemoryFox, I'd love to take, 10 or 15 more minutes just to walk through how our tool works. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this work. Can you
You're
see
up,
my
Danielle.
screen okay? Is it working out? Yeah.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you again, Maria. That was really, really amazing. I did all the breathing exercises and sat through, and it actually helped me today get my day started because I'm here in San Diego. It's still pretty early here, but I'm really excited to kind of connect the dots with MemoryFox, and share how we, talk about all of this stuff and how we practice all the things that you just talked about. You talked about collecting and sharing stories in a way that really, protects, respects, and dignifies your community. And we really do try to help serve that purpose here. And I loved your language about story owners and story receivers. So I can talk through a couple things here on our end and how we practice that here, and just a couple of things here to kind of highlight how we do that. We do provide a space to collect consent from your community. So just making sure that you have permission to make sure that you can use the story for what you want to use it for, but you're also clearly stating, to your point earlier, about what you're going to be using it for, so that they know where that story is going to end up, so that they feel comfortable sharing in that way. Providing a safe space to actually giving them an opportunity to tell their story in their own time, in their own words. Our tool allows people to, sit in front of their own camera and their own phone in their own space and talk about things, when it feels right for them. Like you mentioned, kind of giving people time and space to reflect and being the heroes that tell that story when they're ready. And then curating a diverse story bank. So, for us, that's our content library, but it allows you to, humanize your impact and your progress by collecting a lot of stories. So it's not just one person's story, it is a diverse book of stories, all the people that make up your organization. So it's not just one person, but it's a lot of stories. And lastly, just the resources and support. We really pride ourselves on supporting our nonprofits. We don't just hand you the tool and say, good luck. We actually support you throughout that process. We provide one-on-one customer support, as well as we just are about to launch our campfire community next week. We're super stoked about that. We already have a lot of our customers signed up, and it's a space that we're making for our customers to gather and talk about engagement and how to really tell great stories from their community. And that is really kind of how we connect there. But a little bit about us, MemoryFox, we're, like Celine mentioned, we're a veteran-owned organization based out of Buffalo, New York. We are Bills fans. We're also Blizzard survivors. So we're strong in a lot of ways, but we also support all nonprofits. So all of our customers are 501c3s and mission-driven organizations. And, I like to share that, for a couple of reasons. And one of them being, as we continue to make improvements to our tool, we really do so alongside the feedback we get from other nonprofits. And I think that's something that kind of sets us apart, is we always kind of have that mission mindset in mind. And that includes our most recent Canva integration. If you can't tell, this is a Canva presentation here, but we love Canva at MemoryFox because of all of the amazing templates that they have. And we released an integration where you can pull all of your community stories directly into any project that you're working on within Canva. But our tool was actually designed alongside a nonprofit in Western New York, our local United Way. And it was really designed to kind of help solve three main issues that we were really seeing in the community, which was, collecting content from their community was really tough. I mean, similar to all of you guys serve so many community members, and sometimes getting people to actually share those proof of impact stories can be an afterthought. So getting people to actually share that content, we noticed, was a big issue. And you need that content for things like getting more volunteers, to get funding, to secure those grants. So we really wanted to help address that issue, organizing it in one location. So just having one spot, a content library where it's all stored and organized and accessible within your organization. A lot of our customers came from that space where things were in Google Drives or in emails and WhatsApp. So this kind of just centralizes all that content. And lastly, just having a more efficient and modern way to tell their story. So what to do with all of that content. And truly, oops, just skipped over my slide here, but a lot of our customers do kind of come in with that one use case, and similar to what Maria was talking about, where you may want to just spend some time collecting those few really impactful stories that you can use over time. But there's so many different use cases and so many different stories that make up your organization. So while one person may come in and you want to collect that program story, that really impactful moment, where someone shares what they learned or gained from your organization, but you can also spend time collecting volunteer stories, staff stories, and those staff stories can be used to recruit more staff. So there's so many different things that you can collect stories around, and there's so many things to do with those stories. And that's really part of what we love to talk about at MemoryFox, and we can do deeper dives on those one-on-one calls that you can do with our customer service team, as well as in our campfire community. There's so many different ways that you can collect stories and things you can do with them. And the layout of MemoryFox is collect, organize, and share. So what you see here on the left side is what we call the storyteller side of the journey. And this is how your storyteller submits their stories to your organization. So this can be accessed via QR code or a link that they click on, and it takes them right to this secure page where it is really designed to be an extension of your brand, your website. So this is your logo here. And when they click on that, they see your space so that they know that they're sharing directly with your organization. And so I will show you in a second here a little bit more what that looks like, but this is the storyteller side of the journey where they're submitting their stories to you all. And then this is your dashboard. This is the organized side. So this is where all of your stories live. It's a content library where it's all stored and organized and accessible. It's where you're creating these campaigns here. So it's really just the space. Oh, sorry, my presentation's skipping around a little bit here, but this is, again, where your content lives. You own all of that content as well. Super important to us from a privacy standpoint. When you're collecting stories from your community, the ownership is in your organization because they are sharing with you, the trusted source. And then the share side. So, you're able to download all of this content, all of your pictures and videos and testimonials directly from this content library, use it for whatever purposes that you need, but you're also able to share that content in a couple different ways. Like I mentioned, we have that Canva integration where you can pull all of your content directly into a Canva project that you're working on. And you're also able to create what we call story pages. And that's just a really simple way to display and share content. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second as well. But just to kind of show you a brief overview of the story collection tool. So this is, again, what the storyteller sees. And this is your logo here. And this is the first thing that they see. So this is your opportunity to give them a little bit of a description, the why you're asking people to share. And what's nice here about this step, and with, throughout this camp and what we call them campaigns, is that you're actually taking time to create language that gives them the prompts that will give them, space to engage them to tell the stories that you want. So when you're introducing the campaign here, you're describing what you want people, the reason why you're asking them to share ahead of time so they can kind of understand what you're asking. They hit start. This is where you can collect some custom user data. So you can get their name, their email, phone number, collect as many fields here as you would like. And you can get that consent here as well. So this is where you're going to lay out exactly where your story is going to be used. Anything that they can expect there, they have to check that box to continue. And so here are your storyteller prompts. So this is your opportunity to customize really specifically what you want people to talk about here. So this is where you're these are actually buttons here, so they can choose which question they feel most comfortable with. And they can also, go down the list and answer all of them because it is set up like a progress tracker, trying to encourage them to share more than one story. And so, I loved Maria's earlier example where you could ask something like, what does it feel like today? Like doesn't seem so big, so there's so many different ways you can shape these questions to make space for your storytellers. And when they choose that question, what's really nice about this step is that it actually carries over the language right within the recording screen, so they don't forget what to talk about while they're recording. And again, you're customizing this language. It's right in front of them. They're doing it at the time that they feel most comfortable in the space of their own home or wherever they want to be doing it. They also can choose how they want to upload and what they're most comfortable with. Maybe someone wants to record a video and they are comfortable with putting their face on the screen and saying things in their own words. Maybe they just want to send a picture and put their text next to it. Maybe they just want to do text and you want to keep it private and you don't want to have someone's face on it. They can just give the text. So there's lots of different ways to kind of just put the power in their hands and let them submit whatever they feel most comfortable with. And what's really nice for you all too is that this kind of eliminates those file sharing issues. So, whatever size file they've taken, whatever format, if they've taken it on an iPhone or an Android, it's a 5-minute video, a 3-minute video, you can truly just have them transfer over that file in this step here, and you get that original quality piece of content as they recorded it. You can also have the upload button. Maybe they pre-recorded something at another time. It'll just ask for access to their camera, their library, and they can send it over to you there. So lots of different ways for them to submit that content right here in this step. And again, you customize this step so they can really they don't have to overthink it. They have the directions right in front of them. They hit submit and then they're done. So it's also a very quick process for them. Just a couple of steps. In this top right-hand corner here, they can review what they've sent into you. They can continue to go back and share more. And then lastly, this is that redirect here. So this is designed to kind of close the loop on that storyteller journey. So, however they found you, they can kind of go back to your website. You can attach your secure donation page. However you kind of want to close the loop on that storyteller journey, you can include a hyperlink here. And what's nice about the way the subscriptions work is that you can do as many campaigns at one time as you would like. So you can run a campaign for your storytellers, for your program beneficiaries, your volunteers. You can ask why people donated. You get unlimited campaigns within a subscription, and you get unlimited storage as well, which brings me to my next slide, how all of your content is stored. And so as everything comes in, it all gets tagged and organized automatically at the point of capture and lives in your content library here. So what's really nice is that in this step here, all the most recent stuff populates at the top. So you can always have a pulse on what's going on in your organization and all your campaigns. But when you want to find a piece of content, you can actually sort by your campaign. You can sort by question across multiple campaigns. You can create internal search tags. Say, for example, something came in and you want to tag it newsletter because you think it's going to be great for your newsletter. Then when it's time to make that newsletter, you can actually sort by newsletter in your tags. And which is why we also give unlimited admin seats to your organization as well. So you can give an admin seat to the person that creates your newsletter, as well as your, or maybe they wear all the hats, but you can ultimately give admin seats to the people that want to use those tags and then sort by them to create an Instagram post, whatever it is that you want to sort this library by. It works as just an infinite scrolling. So you can see all your content and then sort down to find what you want to look for. And just one additional piece that's really nice about this content library is that we do have some features for chapter-based organizations where, if you have the ability to, actually focus on different views. So you can give access to different sub accounts, which we can deeper dive into if you ever want to talk more about how your chapter-based organization works and how to create accessibility there and different visibility features. And lastly, you're able to share these stories. So like I mentioned, you can download all this content directly from your content library, take it wherever you need to take it. But we also have some features within MemoryFox where you can share in story pages. So this is just a really simple website builder where you can create these independent URLs, just shareable web pages with a very few design features. And you can either handpick which pieces of content go directly into these story pages here, or you can set it up so that it automatically sends content from campaigns directly into one of the segments on that page. So what's really nice is these are just really simple shareable websites that you can embed directly into your website. You can share them. Actually, a pretty common use case of these is like after a 5K or a gala that you may host, you can collect stories directly in an event and share a story roll up of all the stories that were submitted at that fundraiser. And you can share that in your newsletter after. So lots of different ways to use those story pages. And we're happy to talk through what that would look like as well. So the last piece really here is just that Canva integration, like I talked about. As you can see here, you can pull all of your Canva content directly into your Canva account. If you're working on a project here, super easy to pull that piece of content directly into a project that you're working on. So that's really the nuts and bolts of MemoryFox. And I would love to spend some time, if anybody wants to scan this QR code here, feel free to schedule some time with me. I love meeting individually, doing one-on-ones, doing a deeper dive into the processes of your nonprofit and see how we can actually really integrate these QR code and links into what you guys are currently doing, see how we can really help you collect impactful community stories. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how our pricing and subscription works here to kind of tie it all up. So we do work on an equitable based pricing structure, and we try to mirror our pricing off of your most recent $9.90. So we have different price tiers for every organization. But what's nice is that every nonprofit does get access to all of these features. We really try not to limit anything to make sure that everyone has an equitable access to what we're trying to support you on here, which starts as low as $125 a month. So please feel free to reach out, schedule some time with me. We can review all of these features here, walk through how your nonprofit is set up and how we can potentially help you collect community stories. And again, within those subscriptions, you're going to get unlimited campaigns, unlimited storage in our content library, that Canva integration, access to our MemoryFox campfire community, and access to our customer service team. So lots of things within a subscription to kind of help you get started. So feel free to schedule some time with me to talk more about that. And thank you guys so much for sticking around and chatting and learning more about MemoryFox. I think I saw a couple things in the chat, Celine. I don't know if you're going to come back on here. Otherwise, I can just kind of tie it up here. But feel free to schedule some time with me. We can do a deeper dive into your nonprofit and how we can help. Thank you guys so much for sticking around and learning about all of these resources today. Such an amazing webinar today. So thank you guys for sticking around and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you soon. Next time, look out for an email from us. Keep telling great stories.